Hello to you, family. How are you all doing? I pray that you are well, that you're blessed, you have a sound mind, you have health in your bodies. How are you all doing? Thank you for joining me for another session tonight. We have several folks, some familiar names. Sister, let's go back up to the top so that I can greet some folks and then we'll get started with this. So how are you doing, Brother Ivan, Lamp of Oil, Vakia, Diana, Saw? How you doing, Minister Gwinnett? Good to have you with us. Carmen, let's see, Matonia. We also have Sumaya. Good to have you with us. Janet, great. Miriam Jones, Brother Harold, how you doing? Vikisha, Yukishia, Brother Arnold, how are you? Dorothy, how you doing, sis? Let's see. Yabu, Brown Girl 67, Rose M, Muriel, and some of your names are very similar, so I'm hoping that I'm not skipping over folks. Choctaw family. Looking forward to a great lesson. No pressure. No pressure, right? Brother Tyrone. Let's see. Lizette. Brother Asaph, how you doing? Shout out to you. Yeah, right. No, I think you're in that category. Good to have you with us. Colored Girl 72, Cassandra, Vita's Child, the Negro Unchained. I hope all is well with you as well. Diana G, Yaz Saint, Alvinia Sneed, Lisa Marie, ML Park, released from the cave. You were in the cave. How you doing, Sister Erica, Sister Cece, Brother Darnell? Seeing a lot of our prayer group members. Good to have you with us. Sister Kim, Queen Mommy, James Smith. Oh, you all, if I don't get started, you all will be here until 11. Then you'll be blaming me. Hello and welcome to all of you joining us, watching by TV or on your phone. Those of you who are tuning in as you're driving to various places, please, get my words together. Peace and blessings to all of you. So again, thanks for joining me for another session. So hopefully you're ready to dig into this. We're talking about the God of our enemy and how we do church. That's going to come at the tail end of it. But please hang in there because I'm going to share some things near the end. But according to theologians, Christianity triumphed over the pagan religions of ancient Rome, and the conversion of Romans, according to them, led to the greatest transformation the world has ever seen. Is this true? So we're going to talk about it in this session, and we're going to look at how the descendants of Esau Edom joined forces with the Roman Empire and used the new religion of Christianity to help Esau get his revenge on us, on the children of Jacob. So we're going to get started with this because, again, as I said, I have a lot to cover. Just need to go back up to the beginning, you all. I was scrolling through the slides to try to make sure everything was okay with that. Forgot to go back. So we're talking about the God of our enemies in this session. And do you know where it all began? We know that the children of Israel were chosen to receive the oracles that came directly from the Most High. It was supposed to set us apart from the other nations. So let's remember that Esau knew the history of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And without a doubt, his descendants knew that the oracles were given to Israel and that they were chosen by the Most High. Esau knew this. So let's look at this from Deuteronomy 27, 9 through 10. It says, the Most High will establish you as his holy people, as he promised you on oath. Let's not forget that. We have an oath and a promise. He says, if you, now here's the if you do this, then I do this. But if you keep the commands of the Most High Yah and walk in obedience to him, then all the peoples on earth will see that you are called by the name of the Most High, and they will fear you. They will fear you. Just think about that for a second. So if you understand that there are blessings and curses, and you realize that if you get the people to move from under their protective covering, and what's the covering? Obedience. We can try to pretty it up a bit, but it was basically walking in obedience. If you get them to move from under that protective covering, then they won't walk in these promises, and we can get up over them. Think about the enemies. Oh, we had a lot of enemies. So look at this verse in Revelation 2:12 through 14. It tells us that's exactly what our enemies used. They used our own books against us. It says Balaam taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel. Listen, and to the angel of the church in Pergamos write, these things says he who has the sharp two-edged sword. I know your works and where you dwell, where Satan's throne is. And you hold fast to my name and did not deny me in faith, even in the days in which Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was killed among you where Satan dwells. But I have a few things against you, because you have there those who hold the doctrine of Balaam. What did Balaam do? He taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel to do what? Eat things sacrificed to idols and to commit sexual immorality. So don't you think the enemies of our ancestors shared the information with the other haters? Of course they did, because they saw what happened to us every time we disobeyed. So listen to this now. Deuteronomy 28:24 through 26. All the nations will say, why has the Most High done this to this land? What caused the heat of this great anger? Like, why was he so upset with his people? Then those same people will say, it's because they, the Israelites, abandoned the covenant of the Most High, which he made with them when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. And they went and served other gods and worshiped them, gods whom they had not known and whom he had not allotted to them. So don't think our enemies didn't know this. They knew this. They knew that our disobedience brought about the wrath of Yah. All they had to do is make sure we would disobey, be caught up in fornication, idolatry, serving their gods. So let's go on. Most of us remember this passage from Psalm 83:4 through 8. You see the first two names on the list that was in this confederacy against us, Edom and the Ishmaelites. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. For they have consulted together with one consent. They came together, united for a cause, to cut us off from being a nation, and they formed a confederacy. against the Most High and his people. So it names these other folks who helped them, but the two, Edom and the Ishmaelites, we're talking about kinfolk. Kinfolk. But the other thing we have to remember is the Roman Empire made it possible for Psalm 83 to come to fruition, to cut us off from being a nation. For sure, the Edomites were the ringleaders, but the Arabs had a big part to play in this as well, and we're going to talk about them because we don't often talk about their role, but we need to talk about them. So, as discussed in the beginning of this session, we talked about this vision that Nebuchadnezzar had, this dream, the statue that he had. And then we talked about the Herodians in the last session and how they descended from Esau. These were Hebrews. So who better to work with the Romans to set the trap? Esau knew the significance of the oracles and what would happen to Jacob's seed if they disobeyed the laws, statutes, and commandments. The plan to erase Israel was to take their books, introduce a new religious system, and then try to imitate what was given to Israel, then use genocide and slavery to get rid of as many of them as possible, and then introduce a new people as the chosen people. This all happened with the fourth beast. Rome was that fourth beast. So we have to look at this naturally and spiritually. Rome is the last kingdom, and Rome did what the others didn't do. I hope you're understanding. They fulfilled the plans of our enemies to cut us off from being a nation. They fulfilled it. Even though we went into captivity many times before, during the head of gold, during the chest of bronze, during the belly of silver with the Greece or the Greek Empire, we went into captivity as a nation. But when it came to this last beast, Rome was effective and basically cutting us off as a nation. It was like we ceased to exist after the Romans destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD. Because if you think about it, our ancestors knew who they were even when they were in captivity prior to that. Those from the house of Judah also had opportunities to go back to the land after captivity. Catch this, they at least knew where the land was. But the Roman Empire was so successful with the plan that they had set in place that we're still going back and forth about our father's name, where the land is, what the people look like. They enacted new laws, ways to worship, did away with feast days, instituted a new calendar. They completed what the Greeks started with the whitewashing of the images to make the world believe that the Bible is centered around Europeans. Yah and Messiah are now blonde-haired, blue-eyed Europeans. They painted their own images in and made themselves kings and priests. The names in the book were changed to European names. They changed our history to the point that we didn't even remember that we were the people. I mean, can you say they were effective in getting that done? They were very effective. The other empires did not take it to this level, not to the level that the Romans took it to. So now that we are remembering ourselves, let's look back and see the strategy that was used. We're going to look at some information from ancienthistorylist.com. It says the top 10 religious practices in ancient Rome, and we're not going to cover all 10. I want to highlight a few things. It says the Romans had their own unique religion, and religious observance was important for both family and state. Festival and ritual were commonplace and were occasions of great merriment. Every Roman house had a sacred fire. Every Roman house had a sacred fire, and people believed that the lit fire would protect the family. When the fire went out, they thought that something terrible would happen in the family. The Romans had their own gods too, such as Jupiter, talking about Zeus, Juno for Hera, and Minerva, Athena, and many others. It says during the 1st century AD, the Romans copied the Greek gods, changing their names and attributes to suit their own needs. Although Roman religion changed profoundly after the introduction of Christianity, the question is, why did it change profoundly after Christianity? That's something we need to think about. Why did it change? They would only do that if it was going to benefit them, right? So we know the Greeks copied from the Egyptians when Alexander the Greek conquered Egypt, and they also changed the names of the gods. And where did Egypt get it from? Babylon, the head of gold. So why did the religious system of the Romans change so profoundly after the introduction of Christianity? They had control of our books. That happened in this empire, the reign of this empire. They knew the power that it contained. Christians would have us believe that a miracle occurred and Constantine received the gospel and the rest is history. But I think we all now know that is definitely not the case. Let's really take a look at this so-called religious background of Constantine. It says the religious background of Constantine, scholars continue to debate and examine the rationale for Constantine's conversion to Christianity. One element involves attempts to determine the demographics of the Roman Empire. Christianity had grown steadily since the 1st century CE, and by 300 CE, there are estimates that out of a total population of 60 million, 3 million were Christians. But the Yehudis still numbered 11 million. Some contend that Constantine was smart enough to foresee the winds of change. However, Constantine may have perhaps been pre-programmed for some of his beliefs. So we see now that the Yehudis still outnumbered the Christians. Here's the question. Are the Christians they're talking about the Yehudis that were followers of the way, those who believed Messiah, or are we talking about the Gentile converts? And this is important because remember, the goal was to cut Israel off. If that's the goal, then you're going to find a way to make sure you count them separately, to make sure they are not joined with the people who would later say they are now the new people. Let's go on. It says, during the reign, and this is pixelated a bit, the copy was that way. It says, during the reign of Emperor Aurelian, the cult of Sol Invictus, which means the invincible, unconquered sun. During his reign, it was promoted as his family cult. This cult also embodied concepts of Jupiter, Apollo, and Helios. Sol Invictus merged with another popular military cult, that of Mithras. So during this empire, you see two popular cults merging: Sol Invictus and the cult of Mithras. It says at the same time, Aurelian also reorganized imperial finances and regulated imports and the price of food throughout the provinces. His ideals may be summarized as, listen, this is the goal: one God, one empire. Constantius and his son Constantine were both members of the cult of Sol Invictus. So was Constantine really a committed Christian? It says many books on Constantine continue to debate Constantine's commitment as a Christian. Criticism of his conversion involve the Edict of Milan legalized Christians but left all the native cults in place. The Ark of Constantine lacks Christian symbols and contains sculptures of offerings to Apollo, Diana, and Hercules. Constantine issued coins with himself in the figure of Sol Invictus and Helios. And Constantine was not baptized as a Christian until he was on his deathbed. So should we really believe that this man had a conversion? Was he really committed? No. Here's what Constantine was trying to do. Let's read. This is about the Donatist schism. It says, during the persecution against Christians under Diocletian, in addition to arrests, the emperor, listen, had ordered Christian clergy to hand over their sacred texts. Why? Why would they order them to turn over the books? We know why. It says, to avoid imprisonment and the arenas, some, including bishops, had done so. Divisions had grown among the Christian communities, and one group, led by Bishop Donatus, was adamant that these bishops were now defiled. The bishops petitioned Constantine to act as a mediator in this problem. Listen, Constantine was determined to instill unity throughout the Roman Empire, and he ordered a policy of forgive and forget. Forgive and forget? Isn't that policy still resonating with Europeans today? We should be the ones to forgive, and we should also be the ones to forget what they did to us. Let's go on. It says, Bishop Donatus refused and his followers settled in North Africa. Interesting that they settled in North Africa. Ethiopia is also in North Africa, and they say they have the oldest copy of the Bible. But let's go on. So they clashed with Augustine of Hippo 100 years later. By issuing the order, Constantine effectively became the official head of the church. He took the position, Pontifex Maximus, the head of the Roman religion. This was his role. He became sole emperor. So in that position, he essentially expanded the ideas of Aurelian in that he could now enforce one God, one emperor, one church. This has been the strategy. One God, one emperor, now Pope, one church. Divide and conquer, but they unite under this ideal, this philosophy. So This was the goal. And they implemented this, they executed this, because we are now at the stage where we can look back and see the effects of it. They had to bring all of the different religious systems together and make it one religious syncretism. I've talked about that a number of times. This comes from World History Encyclopedia. The concept of a creed. The creed they came up with is I believe. This was a Christian innovation. With multiple native cults, there was no central or authority that dictated what all should believe. The Nicene Creed formalized one system of belief that was promoted through the power of the emperor. As such, any dissent was not only heresy, but treason. Are you hearing that? To dissent and say, no, I don't agree with this creed was not only heresy, it was treason. You couldn't disobey. You couldn't go against this. And this is the one thing Christians miss. Christianity, this religious system, erased people who did not want to convert or those who disagreed. There was no choice. Do you honestly think that's how the Most High operates? No. So let's go on. It says the Council of Nicaea also set the date for the empire-wide celebration of Easter. Some communities, this was one of the first things they did. It says some communities had insisted on following the gospel tradition of observance during the Yehudi Passover. Let's just say the Passover, Pesach. This is what Constantine wrote. It appeared an unworthy thing that in the celebration of this most holy feast, we should follow the practice of the Jews, who have impiously defiled their hands with enormous sin and are therefore deservedly afflicted with blindness of soul. Let us then have nothing in common with the detestable Israelites, for we have received from our Savior a different way. Why are they saying it's an unworthy thing to follow the practices of the Yehudim? We don't want to have anything in common with them. Are you getting this? The Yehudis are no longer worthy to be considered a people or have anything to do with the oracles that were given to them, their own books. This is profound. So Rome defined what was holy and true, and then they began to spread it around the world with the help of the Edomites. We had Esau and Ishmael in league with the Romans. In essence, it's a fulfillment of prophecy that we would serve the gods of wood and stone. Now let's look at Ishmael's role in this. The name of this book is called Rome and the Arabs. I'm going to look at some excerpts. So it says, the Iturians, an old Arab people known to the classical sources. Since the days of Alexander the Greek, inhabited and ruled both Lebanon and anti-Lebanon. From the latter, they expanded into the conquered Batanea, I believe, and these words, Trachonitis and Aranitis. It says, to the south were the Nabateans of Petra. Who are we talking about? In possession of extensive territory that included Transjordan and the Sinai Peninsula. And in the 1st century BC, They were in occupation of Damascus itself. They were the most important Arab group in the area and possibly the oldest. Listen, the Idumeans inhabited southern Palestine to the west of the Dead Sea. Whether they had been pushed westward by the Nabateans, Arabs, in the 4th century BC, however, it was not until the fall of the Hasmoneans in the second half of the century that the Idumeans under Herod became with Rome's support politically dominant for more than a century, both in Palestine and in southern Syria. Finally, it says, there were Arabs living in Egypt, even in pre-Christian times, between the Nile and the Red Sea, in the Ptolemaic nome called Arabia. Now, why is this information important for us to know? Because we need to see how our enemies began working against us. The Nabateans were connected to Ishmael, and according to historical accounts, it is said that they descend from Nabahoth, one of the 12 sons of Ishmael. So just know that the prophecy in Psalm told us that Esau and Ishmael played a role. Those were the first two names mentioned. They played a role in putting things in place to cut us off from being a nation. They were so effective because they knew our language. They knew our laws. They knew the customs. They were both descendants of Abraham. We're talking about Hebrews here. And they used that information to their advantage. Deuteronomy 5:8 says that we were not to make any graven image, any likeness of anything in heaven above or in the earth beneath, or that's in the waters beneath the earth. So listen to this. This is from a journal article entitled "The Coins of Philip the Tetrarch and the Imperial Cult: A View from Peneus and the Fall of Sejanus." So listen to this. Philip, we're talking about the Edomite son of Herod. What did he do? He was the first Jewish ruler to depict human images on his coins. He was the first. This says the development of iconography on his issues corresponds to specific political events in cultic or political events of cultic concern. Cultic concerns? Why would it be considered cultic? He knew that this was something the Israelites was not supposed to do. But as an Edomite ruler, he was the first to do this. What were the cultic concerns? Let's take a look at the coins and find out more about Peneus. So this is a coin. Take a look at this. He placed an image of Augustus on the front of the coin, and then he placed his image on the back. Next, he had another coin made. He placed his head on the front, and he placed a pagan temple in Peneus, Caesarea, on the back to reflect his aggressive promotion of paganism. Look at that temple, because I want you to remember what it looks like, the triangular shape and the columns. Remember what that looks like. We're going to look at some pictures later on. Now let's look at the area that we're talking about, Caesarea Philippi. And it's also known by several other names. I'll just name a few: Baal, Gad, Banias, Caesarea of Philip, Caesarea Paneas, and Panion. But this place sits at the base of Mount Hermon. Did that ring a few bells? There were numerous temples built in the city. One of them was called Nimrod's fortress. Nimrod's fortress. Let's take a look at these. This is showing us some of the things that are there, and you're going to see a pattern. It says, this place is apparently known as Baal Hermon and Baal Gad in the Old Testament period. This site later was named Paneas after the Greek god Pan, who was worshipped here. There's no record of Messiah entering the city, but the Great Confession and the Transfiguration both occurred in the vicinity of this city, then known as Caesarea Philippi. What else is there? There's a grotto of Pan there. It says the spring emerged from the large cave, which became the center of pagan worship. Beginning in the 3rd century BC, sacrifices were cast into the cave as offerings to the god Pan. I covered this a few weeks ago. Pan, the half-man, half-goat god of fright, thus panic, is often depicted playing the flute. The city's modern name is Banias. So in this temple area, during the Hellenistic period, this city was resettled, and an open-air sanctuary was built for Pan next to the source of water that exited the cave. Interesting, right? What should we know about Pan? Most of you are familiar with him, or the image, I should say. What did he look like and what was he known for? He was the goat god. Most of the images that you'll find for him is showing the male private parts. Who was promoting this? An Edomite ruling in our land. So Pan, the pastoral god. Pan was a minor deity in Greek mythology and god of nature, the wild flock, shepherds, mountain wilds, and sexuality. Pan was part goat, part man. He didn't have an important role to play, but remains a culturally significant Greek deity. He is said to have invented the panpipes and is connected to the creation of echoes. You all are already understanding, and you can see who this is right here that we're talking about. Who does it look like? Baphomet, right? Let's go back to the article. So we're talking about the Arab factor in Roman history in the 3rd century. Let's look at this. This says, the 3rd century witnessed a considerable surge of Arab self-assertion through which the Arabs became a factor in Roman history throughout the century. Septimius, and we talked about him in the last session, was not an Arab but a Phoenician from Leptis Magna. His wife, however, was descended from the line of Arab priest kings that had ruled Emesa in Roman times for a long period after the settlements of Pompeii. It was Julia Domna who provided the Arab element to the Severi, directly as the wife of Septimius Severus and the mother of Caracalla, who was thus half Arab, and indirectly, it's you can see the picture here. It's telling us they had that Edomite bloodline, but they also had an Arab bloodline. So there was a factor there, and oftentimes we miss these links when we're talking about the Arabs. So let's go on. It says, there were 2 Arab people who contributed most to the urbanization of the region where the Nabateans and the Herodians were. So in the history of paganism in the Roman period, the contribution of the Arabs is important enough. That contribution reached its climax in the reign of the sovereign Elagabalus, who installed the Arab sun god in Rome itself. I'm pausing there. It was an Arab that installed the Arab sun god in Rome. It says, although the worship of the sun god did not last long, it witnessed a revival later in the century in the reign of Aurelian. So, yeah, they played a bigger part than is talked about, we should say. Let's find out more about this Arab sun god. So, Elagabal. It says the pantheon of Emesa. All gods of the pantheon of the Arab city Emesa in Syria had Semitic names, with one exception. The supreme god Elagabal, who represented the sun. His unusual name suggests an earlier origin and suggests this god was a local deity related to similar pre-Arabian gods from Canaan. The Aramaic form of the name, Elagabal, they name it, I'm not going to say it, but it means God of the mountain. So mountain gods had been known in Anatolia, Syria, and Palestine since the Hittite times, and they continue to be venerated up until the Roman ages. They were often portrayed with eagles. Interesting, right? But listen to this. Elagabal has also been compared to the Chaldean god Gebel, which can be translated as God of the Black Stone. Let that sink in. God of the Black Stone. Is it all coming together, family? What did he say? We would worship gods of wood and stone. Wow. Wow. Let's go on. So according to Eusebius, he says Herod is mentioned as the son of an Arab mother. The semi-Arab origin of that most unattractive figure in the Gospels could not have endeared the Arabs under a cloud of Ishmaelites. Now, what in the world is he talking about? Could not have endeared the Arabs already under a cloud as Ishmaelites to ecclesiastical historians. Yeah. Here's the thing about the Edomites. Because Esau had mixed his seed so much, particularly with the Neanderthals, a lot of his seed had the fair complexion. Not so much with the Arabs. They still had the darker hue. Let's keep going. So now we're going to look at this article from about Byzantium and the Arabs in the 5th century. They had a connection we didn't really know about here. So it says, a careful examination of the ecclesiastical sources of the 4th century has revealed the existence of an Arab church as a component in the Patriarchate of Antioch. This church grew naturally, stimulated by the rise of a new Federate supremacy in the Orients in the 5th century, that of the Selahids, and by the arrival of new groups who became, some of these words are so small, it's hard to see it, who became foderati. I don't know what that word is. Those were either already Christian or became Christianized after they acquired Federate status, and this entailed the assignment of priests and bishops to serve their spiritual needs. Listen, the discovery of two types of Arab bishops for the 4th century, Federate and Romaic, is important. Why is it important? Because it's telling us that they had a presence in our land. And we know that the Edomites were there, but we don't necessarily place the Arabs there. But now look at this. If we go back to Acts 2:11, it tells us when the day of Pentecost had fully come, their dwelling in Jerusalem were Yehudis. There were devout men from every nation under heaven, and then the multitude came together. And the multitude were confused because they heard them speak in his own language in which they were born. It lists those who were saying that: the Parthians, the Medes, the Elamites, those dwelling in Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, visitors from Rome, both the Yehudis and the proselytes, and listen, Cretans and Arabs. They definitely had a presence, and they were definitely involved. So, this article from Biblical Archaeological Society talks about the earliest evidence of Christianity in Arabia. Before the emergence of Islam in the early 7th century, Arabia was home to a different monotheistic faith. Centuries before Muhammad, centuries before, some ancient Arabian tribes seem to have adopted Christianity. Well, we just read the verse in Acts. They were there. While the arrival of Christianity in Arabia has been known through literary sources written by outsiders, such as the famous Bible scholar and translator Jerome, recent discoveries present evidence of Christianity from pre-Islamic Arabia itself. You all, this is information we need to know because they conspired. All of them conspired. What was the goal? Work together to cut Israel off from being a nation. So with the might of Rome and the knowledge that Esau and Ishmael brought to the table, is it any wonder that the plan that they set in place is still working thousands of years later? It was working. So let's go back to the Etruscans, because we already know that they shaped the Roman history and society. And the historians tell us that we have to understand the influence of the Etruscans to understand Rome. We're not necessarily trying to understand the people. We need to make sure we understand that beast that came out of the sea in Daniel's vision. We need to look at the system. And we know that the Etruscans were a formative influence on religion in Rome. It says they made a decisive contribution to the history of Europe because they shaped in many ways the early development of Rome. The Etruscans were a formative influence on Rome, and this can be seen in its religion, culture, urban planning, and engineering. And they helped to establish it as a great city and one of the greatest powers in Italy. And we already traced them back to who? Esau. Let's go on. It says, how did the Etruscan religion influence Roman religion? The Etruscans were renowned for their oracles and prophecies. One of the Tarquin kings purchased the Sibylline books, which became the prophetic literature of Rome. It's like their own Bible. And this was from an Etruscan temple. It says oracles played a very important part in the religion of Rome. So the Etruscans were renowned for their oracles and prophecies. Who are they imitating, family? Think about how we got the oracles from the Most High. He spoke through those. He had anointed Moses, the priests, prophets, prophetesses. King David prophesied. There were a number of people. And remember that the enemy will imitate the works of the Most High. Think about Balaam. He gave an accurate prophecy. The witch of Endor with Saul. Even though he tried to disguise himself, she knew who he was and called up Samuel. So you need to know that those connected to the kingdom of darkness, they've been effective in using sorcery and witchcraft, but they are limited in their powers. And it certainly is no match for the power of the Most High. The ruling power of this world has to use sorcery to try to stay a step ahead of the plans of Yah. But this tells us that the Etruscans were known for this. And also remember this from the book of Jasher. Balaam left Egypt and he went with Zepho to Kittim. So let's talk about these Sibylline books, and then I'm going to share a dream with you. So this information comes from Historic Mysteries, again, a bit pixelated. It says, in Greek mythology, the Sibyl was originally a solitary prophetess who was famed for the precision of her prophecies. Many thought she was divinely inspired, driven to contorted madness by the visions the gods sent her. So we automatically know this wasn't of the Most High. He didn't give prophecies that caused people to go insane. It says, as time passed, other Sibyllists appeared in various parts of the Mediterranean region, including the legendary Cumaean Sibyl, whom Ananias is said to have consulted. Sibylline prophecies were finally compiled in writing in Rome. So they had their own books of prophecy. It says Roman rulers employed them to understand strange phenomena or natural catastrophes, or to provide guidance on important issues related to foreign entanglements and conflicts. Legend tells us that the last king of Rome, Lucius Tarquinius, acquired the collective Sibylline books for the glory of his growing kingdom. He purchased them from a soothsayer gifted with foresight. Listen, these books had magical properties and would be consulted to guide Rome to greatness. The fact that the original texts were heavily modified and many additions were made over the century also supports they had a concern about these books. But it says, however, the Sibylline books were something else as well, an important part of the Roman identity and Roman exceptionalism. Listen, much like the U.S. politicians cite the Constitution and the intentions of the founding fathers in their politicking today, this is how Rome used these books. This is what they refer to. It says numerous Jewish and Christians created it, and possibly a few pagan authors between the 2nd century BC and 7th century AD, all of whom had different goals and agendas. Now listen, these books were central to the Roman identity. It says 15 high-ranking people were responsible for looking after these books, which were held on the Palatine Hill in Rome. Under the direction of the Senate, officials consulted the books in times of crisis to seek guidance on preventing disasters rather than detailed prophecies of specific future occurrences. So they placed a lot of importance on these books. Look at this. Look at this. This is a painting in the Sistine Chapel. This is a painting. It says Michelangelo's prophets and sibyls painted in the Sistine Chapel are commanding works of art. These figures are the largest on the vault of the chapel. Around the center of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel are 12 prophetic figures, all representing the coming of Messiah. It says, listen, several of these are the prophets of Israel, and the remaining 5 are the female sibyls of the classical world. So they're telling you they use the information from our books as well as the information they got from these witches. It says the alternating male and female figures are seated on thrones and are depicted reading manuscripts, books, or scrolls. The pagan sibyls have been included to symbolize that the Messiah was to come for all the people of the world and not just the Yehudis. So here are the people that they have listed: Jonah, Jeremiah. Then they inserted a Persian sibyl. They have Ezekiel. They have the Eritrean sibyl. They have Joel, Zechariah, the Delphic sibyl. They have Isaiah, a Cumean sibyl. They have Daniel, and the Libyan sibyl. I hope you're getting this. I know this is a lot, but it's going to make sense as I wrap this up. So again, they placed a lot of importance on these sibyls. These are supposed to be prophecies by different women who were said to deliver the divine revelations in a frenzied state. What does it mean, frenzied state? Possessed. A possessed state. These sibyls were used to guide their decisions. Remember, Egypt had them. They just called them a different name. The other nations had them. And they used them to interpret what was given to us. They don't understand all of the prophecies. If they did, Christians would know that the 1948 people didn't fulfill the prophecy about the people going back into the land. So I'm going to share a dream with you. So I'm going to go with the date. This was June 3rd. And I'm only going to share the key points or it would just be too long. I was in what looked like a large hotel room, extremely large. The room was huge, but it looked almost like a sectioned off room in a museum because others were in this room. So it could have been they made this room up to look like a hotel room, but it was in a museum because other people were walking through and looking at different things. So I went over to a bed and I looked at the headboard and I saw an image right above it. And there were words written above it. There was an image of a soldier, a Roman soldier, and he had a weapon. And the words written above him was basically saying, still a servant of Rome. And as I was looking at it, I looked at the image, and right above the image, something opened up like a wide TV screen. And as I'm looking at this screen, I then see a church. And this was a black church because I only saw black people in it. I could see the choir. I could see the altar area. I could see the preacher standing behind the pulpit, and up there with him on the pulpit were various entertainers. And it was like a knowing that dropped into my spirit that said, the way we do church, it all came from Rome. And as I'm looking at the scene, because even though it looked like a TV screen, the people were real. I could see them moving and, talking, etc. It looked like what you would see when you look at the front of a black church. When you walk up there, you see the altar area, then the pulpit, and then right behind the pulpit, you see the choir back there. So I saw the choir there as well. So As I'm looking at this scene, a young sister came up to me and she was talking about Rome. So she was saying there's so much history there, so much we need to know, and she wanted to know more. Another sister, an older woman, came up and she joined in on the conversation, and she started talking and she agreed that there was a lot that, we needed to know about this empire. So we just started talking and sharing information. And I wanted to take the girl over to the bed to show her the image that I had seen and the writing that were written above it. As soon as I walked her over, the room suddenly got dim. So dim, I could barely see the image. So I decided I'm going to get my phone and take a picture of it because the camera light will allow her to see the image and what's written. And as I'm trying to take this picture, I could not get that camera to focus on that image. It was like every time I focus, it would go out of focus and it would shift. And I'm trying to get this picture and nothing was working. Now, in the dream, I suddenly felt myself get a headache. But I keep talking to her and I'm telling her about Rome, trying to get her to know the history. And I'm wanting her to see this image and get a picture of it. And I began saying, we need more people to help us study to share this information. There's so much information to share. But I'm trying to readjust this camera because the picture wouldn't come into focus. And then suddenly I couldn't see it. I woke up from that dream. When I woke up from the dream, I had a headache. Now I'm like, what in the world? I'm laying there with this headache and I got up and I'm trying to write this down. I prayed about the interpretation and then prayed about this headache. And then I went and sat out on a deck thinking I'll get some sun and, it'll go away. And it didn't. And mind you, I still needed to come back in and start working on the message or continue working on it. So I kept praying about this and then it went away. As soon as I got started on the message, it was back. So I knew what it was at that point. This was demonic interference that began in the dream and it was still manifesting in the natural realm. So as I'm thinking about this message later, the headache would return. So after rebuking some things, I knew I needed to immediately go on a fast for a few days because whatever this was trying to prevent the continuation of this study on Rome and block the information from coming forth. There was some type of demonic interference going on. So I knew that was my first step. I needed to fast so that I could continue. But interestingly, I got an email from one of our frontline prayer warriors, and she said, Sister Hulda, I have a dream that I would like to share with you. I had this dream Tuesday morning. That was the same time I had the dream. So we both had this dream Monday night. She said, the only reason I want to share it with you is because you were in it. I don't know if it would mean something to you. So would it be okay? So I'm like, sure. So I'm going to share her dream and I'm only going to go over the highlights. She said, I dreamt that, and she names herself and one of the other sisters in the Zion's Wailing Women's prayer group. She said, we were there with others and we had come together with you in what appeared to be someone's home. We were all praying. And then she says, I began anointing one of the ladies and then someone else would come forth, etc. But she says, in the meantime, she began praying urgently in this dream and fervently asking the Most High to bring forth his word. She says, bring forth the word that has been hidden from us. And she said she prayed, reminding him that he knew where his word was hidden. This is her dream now. And she says, I asked him to bring it forth and reveal it to us. She says, as I was praying, two men began bringing in large books into the room where we were. So the other ladies urged me to keep praying. They were saying, it's working, it's working. So she said, I kept praying as they brought in more books. She says, as I continued to pray, I noticed a white lady in the space with us. And she said, we may have been in her house. She said, at that moment, I realized that I had a pain behind my eye. She said, I woke up and had a headache, which was still there. So she said, I got up and took authority over the headache and recorded the dream and began to pray for understanding. She says, it's 4:22 a.m. Now, family, for those with understanding, I'm sure you see what both dreams are saying. They're basically the same message. There's still a lot out there for us to know about what happened to us. And I believe a lot of it was attached to ritual sacrifices. They were trying to do what Balak asked Balaam to do, which was put curses on us. But there are also more books out there that belong to us. So we need to be praying about these strongholds, these demonic generational curses that they've tried to put on our people. So obviously, these Sibylline books that they're using, these oracles that they supposedly have, they were used to guide their ritual sacrifices. Let's take another look at this information from Time Maps about their military. It says, like other ancient cultures, warfare was a major aspect of Rome's political life. Like many ancient societies, the Etruscans conducted campaigns during summer months, raiding neighboring areas, attempting to gain territory, and engaging in or combating piracy. But listen to this. Human sacrifice was a feature of their religions, and prisoners of war could end up on the altars of Etruscan gods. Just think about what happened to us. Just think about what happened to us. This information comes from Oxford Reference. Roman sacrificial practices were not functionally different from Greek, although the Roman rite was distinguishable from the Greek and Etruscan. As in the Greek world, sacrifice was the central ritual of religion. The expression, they used an expression that means to make a thing sacred. It shows that the sacrifice was an act of transfer of ownership. So on its own or part of larger celebrations, the typical sacrifice embraced 4 phases. So the first phase was the purification. They got the thing purified for the sacrifice. And it says the purification of the participants and the victims. And it was chosen in accordance with the divinity's function and the context. Then a procession led them to the altar of the divinity. There, the presiding figure celebrated the preface on a portable hearth set up beside the sacrificial altar. This rite consisted of offering incense and wine and was the equivalent of a solemn salutation affirming the superiority of the gods. At the same time, this rite opened a ritual space and announced what was to follow. They opened a portal. The blood caused a portal to open. So they talk about the second phase where they pour the wine on the victim's brow and then sprinkled its back with salted meal. And this was prepared by the Vestal virgins. Then they would pass the sacrificial knife, of course, over the victims And then a prayer was spoken during this rite. Listen, immolation. Transfer the victim from human possession to the divine. Once this transfer was effected, the sacrificers failed the victim. You know what they mean, right? They all ganged up on it, and you can see they opened it up, and then they started removing things. Removing things. Now, let's look at something. All right, so this talks about the sacrifices, how they would use certain things, and then it would talk about how a lot of these sacrifices were humans. Humans. These offerings were made to address these gods of the underworld, and it would be followed by a sacrificial banquet. And guess what it says? After they divided whatever it was they had sacrificed, it was just customary that they all had to take a piece of it. It'd be eaten at this great communal banquet. I know some of you already know where I'm going with this. They all had to take a piece of this sacrificial meat, and it had to be eaten or burnt before nightfall. You all think about what they did to our ancestors. The delectable Negro. Think about it. Let's take a look at something here. Jim Crow Museum. In many cases, arguably in most cases, lynch mobs had a particular target and confined their heinous aggression to a specific person. Blacks were lynched for a variety of accusations, and we all know most of them. It didn't matter. They could say anything. So it says, we often think of a mob as an insane, bloodthirsty collection of adult male ruffians. However, respectable community leaders, including police, were also involved in this. Although women and children were not typically the active aggressors, they were in the audience. It says they were often in the audience, and they too did what? Celebrated. While attendees at lynchings did not take away a plate, the experience of having witnessed the event, it says it was customary for them to take a piece of, a piece. It says there is much anecdotal evidence of lynch crowds either consuming food and drink while taking part in the execution or retiring en masse immediately afterward for a meal. But they had to take a piece. So now you know why some folks were taking different parts, different pieces. Listen to this. It says, you see this phallus symbol, this ancient object of worship. As centuries ago, the heathen Petraians, those in Petra, believed that the spirits of their gods rested in these obelisks. So they're not setting up these things for no reason. These things are there for a reason. Let's talk about the temples and shrines. It says Roman temples were among the most versatile architectural designs of the ancient era and were based on the Etruscan model. Roman temples were unique, but were hugely influenced by the Greeks and Etruscans. The temples typically emphasized the front aspect, having high podiums with steps. The temples also had deep colonnade porticos in front of the cella or inner chamber. Most of the temples were built from concrete and brick, but later they were furnished with expensive stone and marble. The Romans had separate temples for each god. But if multiple gods had to be worshipped in one temple, each of the gods had their own icon and cella. It says Etruscan temple architecture has been difficult to reconstruct because of the lack of surviving examples. The Roman architect and writer, whatever his name is, describes a distinct Tuscan temple type with a columned portico and 3 small chambers at the rear interior. But evidence points to a more varied reality. One of the best documented Etruscan temples is the 510 BCE Portaniaso temple at Vie, with a front stepped entrance, columned veranda, side entrance, and 3-part cella. It does match this person's description. The roof was decorated with life-size figure sculpture made in terracotta. A figure of a striding Apollo survives. The temple was perhaps dedicated to Minerva, the Etruscan version of Athena. As in Greek temples, the actual altar and place of religious ceremonies remained outside the temple. So I want you to take a look at this. This is what they're talking about right here. This is the Etruscan temple that they're referencing. What does that look like, family? What does that look like? Here you see the temple of Portunus, the other one that I was talking about. What does that look like? I mean, what comes to mind when you see this? Now look at this. Has it changed much? Honoring the Black church. Here's the thing we need to think about. Those who were in these religions, they profited. They were blessed by it, and our behinds went into captivity, and we were subjugated. But we came out of it doing what they do, worshiping how they worship. What were they doing? Maintaining their control, because now it was like we weren't being forced to do it anymore. Now we're embracing it. Just think about that. Just think about that, and then think about the dream that I was telling you about with that soldier and the message. They're still doing the bidding of Rome. They're still carrying out their assignment against us. You all. Let's read this. Christian soldiers. The lynching and torture of blacks in the Jim Crow South weren't just acts of racism. They were religious rituals. They were religious rituals. So it talks about this woman, Mary Turner, and what they did to her because she protested, because they erased her husband. It says, before a crowd that included women and children, Mary Turner This pregnant woman, they strung her up, stripped her, hung her upside down by the ankles, and then soaked her with you know what. And they had a roasting. That wasn't bad enough. They weren't finished. In the midst of the torment, it says a white man opened her swollen belly. Can you see there what it says about what happened? The unborn fell to the ground. And what did they do to it? You can see it there. It says these lynchings weren't just vigilante punishments, or, as the Equal Justice Initiative notes, celebratory acts of racial control and domination. They were rituals. And specifically, they were rituals of Southern evangelicism and its then dogma of purity, literalism, and white supremacy. You all. It goes on to say they knew this was a religious act laden with Christian symbolism and significance. What was the significance? This is what was passed down. It was passed down. Doing what the ancestors had done. Listen, this is from National Library of Medicine. The link between lynching and race is unquestionable, particularly within the American South. So listen, it says at least 2,500 Blacks were known to have had this happen to them. It equated to 1 a week for 5 decades. Let's not overlook that. 1 a week for 5 decades. Yeah. This from Right Now. Lynching as human sacrifice. In 1899, a newspaper described one that happened in Georgia, and he offed his white employer. So it says, in the presence of 2,000 people who sent aloft yells of defiance and shouts of joy, this man, as you can see from the picture, before the torch was applied, listen, he was deprived of his ears, fingers, and other portions with surprising fortitude. Listen, before it could even cool down, they were sharing pieces. And look, they weren't finished. Took the bones, crushed into small bits. Even the tree, torn up and disposed of as souvenirs. Look at what they did to his heart. The heart, the liver. There were those who were paying for it. Small pieces of his bone, 25 cents. Look at this, a bit of liver. Look, listen, crisped. You only need to pay 10 cents, crisp. Listen to what it says. Such lynchings were a form of religious ritual. Yeah. So we need to really think about and pray about these things and ask the Most High to show us what things were passed on that we're continuing that belongs to Rome, to this beast system that was so terrible. What about the way we worship? This article is talking about the history of the worship order. So, based on scripture, it's saying only 4 elements. It says 4 elements still present in our worship today. Listen to what Justin Martyr wrote. It says Justin Martyr wrote a first-hand account of worship in the early church in his first apology to the Roman authorities. He says, on the day called Sunday, there is a gathering together in the same place. Why was it so important to change the day? No, you have to do it on Sunday, because this is the day they are going to worship the sun god, Sol Invictus. On the day called Sunday, there is a gathering together in the same place of all who live in a given city or rural district. The memoirs of the apostles or the writings of the prophets are read. So now we're talking about the converts, talking about their order. So it says, the memoirs of the apostles or the writings of the prophets are read as long as time permits. Then, when the reader ceases, the president in a discourse admonishes and urges the imitation of these good things. Next, we all rise together and send up prayers. When we cease from our prayers, bread is presented and wine and water. The president, in the same manner, sends up prayers and thanksgiving according to his ability, and the people sing out their assent, saying the Amen. A distribution and participation of the elements for which thanks have been given is made to each person, and to those who are not present, they are sent by the deacons. Those who have means and are willing, each according to his own choice gives what he wills. And what is collected is deposited with the president. He provides for the orphans and widows, those who are in need on account of sickness or some other cause, those who are in bonds, strangers who are sojourning. And in a word, he becomes the protector of all who are in need. We all make our assembly in common on Sunday. Listen, since it is the first day on which God changed the darkness and matter and made the world. Then he says, and Jesus Christ our Savior arose from the dead on the same day. For they crucified him on the day before, listen, Saturn's day, and on the day after, which is the day of the sun. He appeared to his apostles and disciples and taught these things, which we have offered for your consideration. Let me just ask you this. So they supposedly are following in the ways of the apostles and his disciples. When did the apostles and disciples have presidents? Who ran the meeting? Presidents? You all. So let's look at Acts 2:40. You all. Let's look at this to see what they actually did. Is saying, and with many other words he testified and exhorted them, saying, be saved from this perverse generation. Then those who gladly received his word were baptized, and that day about 3,000 souls were added to them. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, in the breaking of bread and in prayers. Then fear come upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. Now all who believed were together and had all things in common, and sold their possessions and goods, and divided them among all as anyone had need. So continuing daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising Yah and having favor with all the people. And the Most High added to the church daily those who were being saved. So, what are the key components? Teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, prayer, and they also worshiped. What do we have happening now? Some of everything, if you think about it. Some of everything. They gathered to share meals, participate in worship. They had teaching. But we learned how to do church from the same folks who took control of our books, tried to erase us, sent us into captivity. Was this Esau's ultimate revenge? How did he get his revenge? He joined forces with our enemies, gained a foothold in our land, and did a switcheroo using a religious system. And we're still seeing the impact today. You're going to see that Edom influenced almost every aspect of our lives in very significant ways. How has he remained on top? By teaching our people how to worship and do church Etruscan style. And remember, family, you only need a little bit of leaven. The God of our enemy impacted the way we, quote unquote, do church. Or should I say, how some of us used to do church? Just think about that. Like I said, I know that was a lot. Let's see what some of you are saying. You all, yeah. But there's more that we need to know. There's more that we need to share. Obviously, we need more hands on deck. We need to pray for our books to be returned to us. The whole truth, so help me out. I'm not going into any of those sodomite institutions ever again. You know, they haven't changed because the attendees look the rest. I think that's attendees look the rest of this diabolical world. I'm assuming you're saying look like. Lady Summer Queen, come out of her. Kina says the two Babylons on Amazon, only $8. I'm assuming that has some of this information in it. I like to read Psalm 51, true repentance. Absolutely. But family, never underestimate the power of prayer. I'm telling you, the most powerful that you can have is when a husband and wife come into agreement on one accord and pray about certain things when they come into agreement. But after that, when you can come into agreement with other like-minded believers and you all are praying the prayers, the fervent, effective prayer of the righteous availeth much. And the enemy fights most of us right there. Most of us do not have time. We'll throw up a quick 5 minutes and that's it. And you don't realize what the enemy's doing behind the scenes, where you could spend that time in Yah's presence and him reveal to you what the enemy's up to, what plans he has, or what plans he's made for you and your family. Sister Dorothy, I thought I heard all the horrors of the evil done to my ancestors, but this makes me sick to my soul. Obviously, there's more. Sister Alma, yes, ma'am, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. seek the Lord. The wickedness of these heathens have no end. Yah saint, the sheer amount of effort in planning to destroy us is mind-blowing. This kind of hate is beyond, it is beyond, it really is beyond I can't, it's hard to just wrap your brain around this stuff. Humanity LLC is just incredible when you just sit back and examine it all. It really is. It really, really is. And my mother was saying the same thing. It's like, we don't know the half. I mean, they did so much stuff. We think we know. We think we know the level of wickedness. And I already told you, some of these folks that we think are human beings are not. There were things in the sea that came out of it. Think about evolution. Think about their theory. Just think about that for a second. Didn't they have something where they were talking about, oh, we were in the sea and then we came out and then we grew legs and then we started walking on water? Then they have this other one, oh, well, we came from monkeys, and maybe they're telling their story and we should listen. I'm just saying, maybe they're telling the truth. I'm not saying all of them, but some of them, to do things like this, no, it's something, you ain't right. Diana says this rabbit hole runs deep. Absolutely. Let's see. I mean, some of this stuff is painful to go through. And let me just say here, I do want to give a word of caution, because I know some of you follow, the things that I share. And then when I talk about certain books, you'll go back and get it. And that's okay. But I'm going to caution you not to go searching out those Sibylline books unless you know the Most High has given you this assignment, because then a covering comes with that. I would say stay away from things that he has not told you to get into, because like I said, even with me, as I was working on this and understanding what the enemy was trying to do with the demonic interference, I knew, okay, I know I need to consecrate myself and get in the Most High's presence. I need his divine protection on us. So just a word of caution there, because sometimes there are some things you just need to leave alone. And if you think about where those utterances came from, you never know what was placed on it, if you know what I mean. Similar to what some of us believe is happening with the music, that they're doing demonic chants and other things over that music. So just understand where I'm coming from there. Let's see, Brother Harold, I have you and your family in my prayers. Thank you. Look, the prayer team, they've been busy. But I thank you all. Thank you. Let's see. The gator bait. Yeah, that's another one. It's like, it's mind-boggling. Who does that? Brother Charles, know your lane when it comes to things above your understanding and covering. Yeah. Praying for an Elisha. Yes. Murmuring and chanting. Yeah. Brother Dwayne, this is a lot of stuff I'm learning. Shakes me to the core, and I have to walk lightly, especially with hearing the recent storyline about. Oh, yes. I couldn't even look at the picture. You all, these things are manifesting. I'm telling you, they're starting to manifest. And you all, I was going to share this an image from this channel. I don't watch this channel. I'm trying to remember the name, Israeli News Live or something, and he had somebody on there, and they were talking. This guy was talking about how he experienced several alien abductions, and then they began sharing their stories. They're beginning to tell on themselves. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. When you looking forward to being abduction and telling people you'll experience love like you never experienced before. And I don't watch that channel, but sometimes as I'm preparing for certain messages, I'll be directed to a particular book or a particular video. And I know when I'm listening for something specific. So that's why I say just be careful, because these dreams, like this dream I had about that I just shared with you, as I'm preparing for some of these things, some of this stuff I need the understanding of. It's like, this is a lot of information. And sometimes I will be given a dream and it makes it a little easier for me to understand some things as I'm working through it. But yeah, family, there's a lot out there. There is a lot out there. Tweety Zion says, I agree. I have them, but was warned by the Ruach to not read them. Wasn't for me. I'm glad you listened. Glad you listened, sis. Because I'm telling you, sometimes as I'm reading through this stuff, I have to stop and pray. Abba Yah, protect my mind, protect me, So yeah, just understand that. Yeah. Sister Glenda, very painful. That's why they can't handle. That's why they don't want the truth to come out. No, they don't want the truth to come out about this. Nope. Yeah, the man that some of you all, like I said, some of these things are manifesting. Some of these things are manifesting. So yeah. It was a lot. We still got some things to unpack. There's so much, but this is the process that I'm having to take before we get to talking about the New Testament, and people are saying don't read any of it, etc. These are some things, some foundational things we need to understand. We need to know who was in our land. Who had control of our books? They had control of our books long before we, realized. Long before that. They were already there. Esau had already set his people in place. They were the ruling elite. So he was playing both sides, We had the Arabs who were there as well. And a lot of Arabs, they come out in defense like, oh no, we're nothing like Christianity. We're so much better. And they present it as the black man religion. Not so. Not so. It says that Edom and Ishmael were involved. And I just showed you a direct link with this. Not all. Because I believe there were those who were there at some Pentecost from all of those nations. They all had an opportunity to hear and receive the truth. And that's just a demonstration of the mercies of the Most High. He allowed the descendants of Abraham to hear and receive truth. And it was up to them to either accept it or not, to continue in the ways that they were going. So just understand that. Let's see, just a few more, and then we're going to wrap up here. Ozodiki, I think that's what it is. I think the Antichrist and false prophet will be half human, half alien. I wouldn't be surprised. Would not be surprised. T of Yah, they are building a Stargate in Dubai. Yeah. We know whose people they are, right? Doing satanic rituals and festival. The world is in chaos. You all, family, I can't stress this enough during your time of prayer, your time of fasting. And this is what I've been telling the prayer team as well. You need to lift your family up. Ask the Most High to reveal those generational curses, the things that are there. The problem is too many of us won't take the time that's needed to wait in Yah's presence. We do a drive-by prayer. It's just too much to do. You don't know that's your lifeline. You need to make time for that. Let other things wait. Make time for that. Moshe Yahoo, yes, we're all on this journey and we must gird up our loins. You're absolutely right there. Absolutely right. Okay, let's see. What does it say? That's why they call it the Babylonian Talmud, written by the Pharisees who would irritate our Messiah and King back in the day. Absolutely. They were there for a reason. And just think about what happened after the fall of the temple. Where did those insiders go? Those Pharisees and Sadducees, where did they go? Where did the Edomites go? Yeah. Wow, Holsley, the truth is at the public library. Vita, your video about the Arab slave trade was very sobering. Yes. All right, family. So we're going to wrap up there. As I said, a lot of information to cover, and there's still more, a whole lot more that we need to know. When it said our people are destroyed because they lack knowledge, we need to pray for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. So you all be blessed and enjoy the rest of your week. Be sure to go ahead and hit the like if you don't mind doing that for us. If you could just quickly hit the like for us and share this message if you believe that it's been a blessing to you. Until next time, be blessed, family.